Hey guys, sebchoof here. After the extremely long wait, it has finally come. The Umi guide. Umi is a nightmare for most players. It's often called the hardest boss in the entire game. But if you study this guide enough, you'll be able to do Umi consistently with little requirements, meaning little gear and stats. And you'll become super rich because of it. I'll also teach you how to increase the chance of Umi spawning, and even methods on making it guaranteed from every Moon Knight village you solo. You really want to learn Umi because it at least gives you a lot of potions, but it can also give you tier 14 primary weapons, the only other source being O3. It gives you the new tier 7 rings, which also drops from O3 and the last boss of Shadows, and it drops 4 awesome white bags. The Kage no Hikari, one of if not the best ring in the game, same as the Makako Yumi, arguably the best bow in the game, and the Tezutsu Hanabi, one of the best scepters in the game, and also the Umi Flame, allowing you to upgrade the Spectral Dagger into a Mischief, the Bulwark into the Fortitude, and the Spirit Staff into the Vigor. Umi can also drop pages to make the book to fight true Umi. You need one of each numbered page from 1 to 5, and if you do so, you can get these really awesome skins. I'll explain everything here in detail to make it as helpful as possible for you, and I'll be timestamping everything, so if you ever have trouble with a specific phase, you can always just skip to that part of the video, so you can always come back to polish up your gameplay. This guide assumes you know the basics of Moon Knight Village and can already survive through the bosses pretty consistently. If you can't, I recommend checking out my first guide. Firstly, let me give you a few tips that will make Umi easier to learn and will stop you from decimating all your characters. Tip number 1. Bring characters you're willing to lose. Just like how I mentioned in the first guide, it's recommended to bring brand new level 20s if you're learning the boss. Just make a brand new character on a free character slot you have, get it to level 20, and pick up gear on the way. Then playing your main character until you see something like a shrine in the realm, or a Moon Knight Village party call, or your friend having a key, and then you can swap to that throwaway level 20. And then join in on the Moon Knight Village that's risk-free. By the way, being on the brand new character actually doesn't change things too much compared to doing other dungeons. Like if you do Shadows on a brand new character, for example, if you try to learn it by yourself, you're going to struggle because you won't even be able to kill the bosses. But the thing about Moon Knight Village is the only things you really need to pass it, or the only things that benefit, are health and vitality. Defense helps a slight amount during the first bosses, so using maxed characters with proper gear is needlessly expensive. Tip number 2, fill your consumable slots and backpack space with HP pots and Ikers. Fill up the first consumable slot with just regular HP pots. You can get full on these in a couple of seconds by going into the guild hall and typing HP to the NPC. Each time he drops a chest of 8 HP pots, so you might need to do a few rounds. Then, to fill your second consumable slot, it's recommended you get Spider Ikers, which is a slightly better regular HP pot basically. To do this, go to the forest biome, look for small spiders and pedo bears. They drop the Spider Den dungeon, where within you can easily get Spider Ikers from the chests, the non-green spiders, and the boss. If you get any extra, you can replace HP pots that are in your inventory with them. 3. Boost your HP easily by equipping a HP ring. Even if it's just a tier 3 or 4, those are easy to come by and go a long way, with many phases preventing you from being able to heal at all, so you just have your base HP to go off. You'll probably even find one when leveling your throwaway characters to level 20. 4. Camera rotation can help a ton. Now you don't need it, but if you don't camera rotate, you're locked into 8 different directions with WASD and its combinations. However, if you do camera turn, you can move in all angles, omnidirectionally. This can help you make precise movements that can make Umi easier. 5. Practice micro movements in your free time by trying to move as slow as you can in the game, by tapping your movement key extremely quickly and lightly. Unlock your inner snail and see how slow you can go, and have people wonder in Nexus what the hell you're doing. You can do this when you're filling in time waiting for someone to call a dungeon, or waiting for someone to rush, for example. 6. Note down each death and figure out how you can play it better next time so you can prevent it from happening again. If you're not sure how you can play it better next time, we do have a help channel in the Discord where if you show us a recording, there will definitely be someone that can help you. If you learn from every single Nexus or death and avoid dying the same way again, imagine how powerful you'll become in 100 deaths. And number 7, you need to know how close you need to be to the lantern in order to get as many flames as possible and progress in the boss as well as you can. If you're within 2 tiles, that's how you can maximally light it. If you're within 4 tiles, it will light up a bit, but not as well as if you were within the 2. And if you're 4 tiles away or more, you'll be safe from lighting it. You'll see why that's important in a moment. Tip number 8, the best way to consistently find solo or private Moonlight villages is by farming the Carboniferous biome, which appears in these locations on the map. You want to be farming the mantises specifically, which have a rare chance of dropping the Moonlight village. Since the world is big, you'd be unlucky if anyone found the portal on their own unless you called it to the public. Tip number 9. This is a weird tip, but it really works. Remind people in your Moonlight village run, if you're with randoms, to please shoot the boss and sit on the lantern as much as you can. Tell them it's to boost their loot. However, please don't be toxic. People might actually be doing the dungeon for their first time. If you really want to solo it, just use the previous tip. To fight the second optional boss, you must be fortunate enough for her to spawn in the building here, but you'll be pleased to know that I'll share some strategies on how to increase and guarantee that chance. She spawns right off the main platform where you verse the first bosses. She asks you 3 different questions that you must answer correctly. They have a variety of answers, but some have a chance to fail. These are the 100% chance answers. If she asks what your favourite food is, answer mushroom. If she asks who your favourite dancer was, answer Carisberg. And if she asks what your favourite folklore is, answer the Happy Prince. These aren't case sensitive, and if you answer too soon after she asks the question, it fails. So wait at least 2 seconds after she asks. Then she asks a follow-up question where you say either yes or no, and then she goes to the main platform for the battle. There's actually 3 different options on how to do the first bosses that can all guarantee the Umi fight on a solo and increase your chance of getting different kinds of gear depending on what you're going for, whether it's the whites or the Umi pages. The different options are maxing out your DPS without your pet, maxing out your DPS with your pet, and Zero Flame. But if you're going to do your first Umi complete, I recommend just not activating the challenge gate so that you can keep your pet. But when you're ready, you can choose from one of the following 3 options to streamline your Umi farm for insane loots. Let's get into the first option, taking the challenge gate. If you've studied my first Moonlight Village guide or experienced the dungeon enough, you would surely know about the challenge gate. This doubles your loot when you activate it before the first bosses at the cost of getting permanently pet stasis for the rest of the dungeon including Umi, but it gives you 2 bag drops instead of just the 1 from both bosses. If you've brought enough health pots with the help of the tips I gave earlier, you should get through the first bosses easily, pet or not. However, Umi can be a bit trickier because you may not have many health pots left and it might ask for more since it's a harder fight. So you may need more experience before trying Umi with the challenge gate. Most people doing Umi are taking this option because it also doubles your loot when you beat Umi, just like the first bosses, so it's kind of worth the risk. When doing this, you want to deal as much damage as you can to the first bosses and Umi to generate spirits, because it increases your loot chance, and if you get enough spirits during the first bosses, it actually guarantees Umi. You need to get an average of 6 flames during the first boss DPS phases, and 8 flames during the lantern phases. However, this is quite class, gear, and skill dependent, which is why I'll be giving class and gear recommendations as well as showing you how to do each phase as effectively as possible. Similarly, the second option is skipping the challenge gate and keeping your pet, and then doing as much damage as you can. This is an option that even pros might want to take. This is because only the first bag of Umi has a chance to drop the pages, the second one cannot. The pages are the items that you need to fight through Umi. The challenge gate actually does not help you at all with your chances of getting pages, and it actually hurts them. This is because if you have your pet, you'll generate more flames during Umi, which increases your loot chance since you have more HP coming from your pet healing, and you'll be able to be more confident doing more damage. On top of that, if you have a magic heal pet, you'll be able to spam your ability more, dealing more damage and thus generating more spirits. Another upside is that it will also help you get flames during the first bosses, which will make it easier to get that 6 flame average during DPS phases and the 8 flame average during lantern phases to guarantee Umi. It also will just increase your chances to live, but this option comes at the big downside of getting half the chance of getting those juicy red and white bags, and many less stat pots. The third option is very different to the first 2, and is the best to take if you lack special gear, or you're just not willing to use it. If you get exactly 0 spirits during the first bosses, Umi is guaranteed to spawn. This is difficult just like the first 2 options, but plays way differently, and it does not require you to do anything but to not hit the bosses during DPS phases, and to stay further than 4 tiles away of the lantern during lantern phases. Doing this will also give you the loot chance equivalent to getting high flames, almost equal to getting that 6 flame and 8 flame average, but definitely better than the average Moonlight Village run. You can also learn this for Umi and do it then if you have a bad set, which will maximize your loot chance from her. All the DPS phases are actually really easy during Zero Flame compared to when you're trying to push in for damage, because you can just play safe and leech essentially. It's just the Lantern phases that are harder, and all phases become longer. After showing you how to maximize your DPS during the first bosses, I'll show you how to become a god at doing the Lantern phases Zero Flame. So there's two big downsides of doing the Zero Flame versus the other two options I mentioned. The first one being, as I mentioned before, runs take longer. When you stand on the Lantern or shoot the boss, it speeds up the fight. Zero Flame runs feel twice as long. And number two, the skills you learn for Zero Flame don't apply in public runs at all, because any flames at all and it ruins the Zero Flame, and there's no way you're going to convince a public group to get no flames, since they most likely don't know how to. That's why you need to share this guide with all your friends and in every Discord you know. The big advantage of Zero Flame runs is that you don't need any gear at all to do it. I've been doing Moonlight Village on my 4th dungeon in my Petless Gauntlet challenge, with the worst gear ever. You'll see later since I use footage from it. Now onto the class and gear recommendations. For surviving in Zero Flame, there's no class I can recommend more than Paladin. It's got a great base HP, great healing, and does good damage compared to other classes with lower end gear. Tiered ability is really mana efficient and will help you do great damage even with the challenge gate enabled, and you'll be able to boost your group DPS an insane amount if there's no one else providing the damaging buff. If you're aiming to do DPS, the class choice is way more important. Some classes struggle infinitely more to get that average 6 flame during DPS phases to guarantee Umi compared to other classes. The best classes to bring to maximize flames would be Warrior, Ninja, Bard, Samurai, and Paladin. For gear, you can always bring a survivability set and a DPS set that you can swap between, whether it's a DPS phase or not, but it can overcomplicate things as a beginner. So if you're starting out, just bring a survival set. If you're looking to survive or Zero Flame and you want to just live, the best stats are max HP and vitality, so look for gear that maximizes that for you. Especially health, since you can't heal in Miko and Umi Lantern phases, and finales. For melees, the best armors are Breastplate of New Life, Fungal Breastplate, Sage's Wacky Bicky, and Cask Corselet for example. Robes would be Soulless Robe, Esben's Shaman Attire, Mantle of the Monarchy, and Diplomatic Robe. And for levers, Leaf Dragonhide Armor, Vest of Abandoned Shadows, Wraith's Brigandine, and Acidic Armor. For rings, bring the highest tier HP ring you can. You can also bring a Vitality ring or a Cuban ring to swap into when you're missing HP, and then you want to swap back to your HP ring. There's so many items that you can use as swap outs that are great for surviving. Seal of Blasphemous Prayer makes DPS phases a joke on Paladin, and this includes during Umi since it makes you invincible for some time. You can even use it during most Lantern phases during the first bosses, except for the blue ones. Similarly, Alien Armors or the Amulet of Restoration are great because they grant you invincibility when you get low, even during Lantern phases, but it only procs once per dungeon. Did you also know you can use the Amulet of Restoration in the Moonlight Village to never die? You legit can't die in this dungeon while wearing this ring, even if you stand on the boss. How it works is, as soon as you take damage from being under 20% HP, even if it's at the same time, the 2-second invulnerability will proc. The only way you can die with this ring through the proc is if you get hit by a projectile that does more than 20% of your HP in one shot, so that it bypasses the possibility of the ring proccing. A shot like this basically doesn't exist in this dungeon, depending on your base HP of course, but as long as you're running with at least 800 HP, it's impossible to die. The downsides of this strategy is that the ring is really hard to get initially, and you want to Nexus once the invulnerability procs every time. These items are pretty rare, so if you don't want to risk them or you don't have them, don't worry, just stack up on HP pots with the tips I gave earlier, and grab any HP ring you can to give it a try. Now for maximizing damage, where the gear is way more demanding. Let's start with the weapons. You want to bring an EP style weapon as a swap out to best maximize your chance of succeeding. These weapons deal insane damage when you almost stand on enemies. Now, you don't need an EP item, it just helps you guarantee that 6 flames and will definitely make the difference in you getting 8 flames during a DPS phase. It also drastically boosts how much you contribute to a group in a non-solo Moonlight Village, especially because there'll be many people healing and buffing you around, making it more safe, especially when you learn how you can use the EP in the next section. Again, the EP equivalent items are basically overkill for getting 6 flames, it just helps with group runs and 8 flames. Just your short range and long range weapon will do the trick. 4 wands, that's Earthen Wand, 4 staves, that's Staff of Extreme Prejudice, and 4 bows, there's the Predator Bow. The other classes don't have one. Then to further maximize your DPS, you want to bring a close range weapon for when you can't stand on the boss. These generally do way more damage than longer range weapons. 4 wands, that's Tyrant Wand, or the highest tier Morningstar you can bring. 4 staves, that's Steam Pipe. 4 swords, it's Damnation. 4 katanas, it's Enforcer, or the highest tier Tachi you can bring. 4 bows, it's Makakayumi. And 4 daggers, it's the highest tier Jewel Dagger, Corruption Cutter, or Archangel's Judgment. Then you want a long range weapon for when you can't even use your short range one, because it can sometimes be too difficult. 4 swords, that's the highest tier sword you can find, or Atavistic Soul Saber. 4 staves, it's the highest tier staff you can bring. 4 katanas, it's Valor or Bloodbath Blade. 4 wands, it's Laser Pointer. 4 bows, it's Makakayumi again. And 4 daggers, it's Mischief, Sea Dirk, or Avarice. Keep in mind, I'm not taking into account enchantments because they're drastically changing soon, so if I mentioned engravings, which it looks like every item will be able to get in the future, this might become wildly outdated. If the gear I mentioned is too much for you, you can always test out lower end gear on a 0 defense target dummy in the guild hall, since all bosses in Moonlight Village have 0 defense, and you can test out what your best EP style and short range and long range weapons are. 4 armors, bring the best DPS stat armor you can, so for robes it's Vesture of Duality, 4 levers it's 10A, and 4 armors it's Mercy's Bane, or the best you can. 4 rings, tier 7 DPS rings are great, as well as regular and hard mode crown. A really important ring to bring as a swap out is the banner. Place this at the start of each DPS phase to give yourself damaging for a few seconds to deal extra damage to the boss. You also want to put it close to the boss because it actually deals some damage. The banner has a 10-second cooldown, so you can use it 2 times per phase, once at the beginning and once when you see the bars filled halfway. If you remember to place them and place them well, it will help an insane amount if you're in a group or solo and don't have access to the damaging buff otherwise. After using it, you want to swap to your DPS ring immediately. And for abilities, it's important that you bring buff granting effects like Curse, Damaging, and Berserk. If you're running with a pet, you can bring multiple to stack, like Mandolin and Drums for Bard for example, but if you only have one or your class only has one, you can bring out a swap out ability to deal extra damage with. If you're running petless though, it's tough to even sustain one buff for a DPS phase. Pause here if you want to see the best abilities for each class. I'll quickly go through each DPS phase during the first bosses and how to maximize your damage during it. I'll do each boss's phases in order of how tough they are. For the footage, I'm using an almost perfect Necromancer, which is a very average class to bring, so if you use one of the classes I recommend earlier, you'll have an easier time. By the way guys, I found out while making the Umi guide that there was this DPS option to guarantee Umi instead of just the Zero Flame, so I was kind of learning this on the job. If I'm playing sloppy during the DPS parts, it's because I'm basically trying to first try them. You can easily become better than me. For the phases you have trouble with, you should use consumables like HP and MP pots to deal more damage. You can also bring other consumables that are usually skipped like HP and Dex tinctures from the Lost Halls. Firstly, the pink phases, which unlike when you first learn the dungeon, it will actually be the easiest for accruing flames for a more experienced player. Youthful Spring is a nice phase for doing damage because Miko just slowly rotates around the map. Just stand in front of her firing your best short range weapon. Falling Petals is also nice, especially if you're solo because she moves in a small, expected fashion. If you're in a group, try to get everyone to move clockwise so that it gets dragged nicely because she seems to choose random players as targets. Just like the last phase, use your best short range weapon, stand close to her, but not too close because you want to watch out for these stacked shots she shoots, which deals like 400 damage before being cursed. Floral Burst is an easier phase, but for a weirder reason, this phase has many EPing opportunities. After each shotgun, it's safe to walk through the lingering shots and stand on the boss. You do need to retreat a second or two after the warning symbols though, because otherwise you'll get instantly killed. You need to get used to the timing, and if you've done this dungeon enough, you most likely have already. Near the end, like 80% of the way through the phase, you have the most EPing potential, because she literally just stands there not shooting. Nature's Cycle is very basic and is really similar to Youthful Spring when it comes to dealing damage, because she's just rotating around the room counterclockwise. It can be pretty tough though standing near her to sustain your close range damage. Wondrous Blossom is also quite basic because she just stands in the middle shooting shotguns that slowly rotate around her. Use your close range weapon as much as you can, and then when the shotgun rotation nears you, just advance past it quickly and keep pumping. The Flowering secondary can make this phase challenging as it's tougher to get close to her. Next, the yellow phases, which are also quite simple mostly because of the fact that the boss just stands in the middle for all of them. So these are the most simple to place the banner, you can use it right away. Just make sure it's in the range of the boss to deal that extra damage. Keep in mind you can EP a bunch during these phases, but the Lightning Line secondary will almost make it impossible for the entire phase unfortunately. so instead use your close range weapon. Lightning Rod is the easiest phase and you can EP this phase quite often. Just make sure you get off when you're getting low, or when you're threatened by secondary attacks like the rooks or drums. Unfaltering Drums is similar, but you can't EP him since he is often shooting lethal damage. It's really easy to hit your close range weapon the whole time. Static Circuit is a phase where you can EP, but only while the boss is in the middle third, because of the shots that split off on the sides. They deal a lot of damage. Just swap with your short range weapon when you're unable to EP. Thunderdome is another phase where you can go crazy with your EP, but it's a bit tougher because of the closing circles. You can get really good EP damage initially since there's a few seconds before the first circle closes in, and before alternate secondary attacks start. Then you can EP more if you find good opportunities. Again, you can stand on this boss until you get low, and then you can just get off. Then you want to swap with your short range weapon. Sonic Projection is the hardest yellow phase to get DPS on, and maybe even the hardest out of all of the first boss phases. The boss does small rotations in the middle while shooting way too many shots. For this phase, you may need to swap between your short range and your long range weapon. Try hitting your short range weapon as much as you can by rotating around the boss, or dipping in and out. For some reason, I could only find this phase once, and when I did, I screwed it up. Finally, the blue DPS phases, which are probably on average the most difficult. Converging Tides is the phase where Genji is just a buffling buffoon who tries to sit on you while not shooting himself, so he's basically inviting you to EP him if you're solo. Otherwise, in a group run, you have to keep up with him. Use your EP equivalent weapon and then swap into a short range weapon when the quiet shots and converging, because they do a decent amount of damage, and even worse, if you get quieted, it will wipe all of your mana. Similarly, Bursting Fountain is basically a harder version to get damage on. You can EP him here too, but it can be quite dangerous. The blue flashing balls he shoots also fires when they travel like one tile away from the boss for a total of around 400 damage each, but again he himself is harmless. If you do EP him, just make sure you don't move away too far so that the portals don't fire on top of you. Don't be afraid to use HP pots to stay healthy to avoid getting insted. You can also just drag him around. He doesn't move so much, it's easier to sustain damage with a close range weapon, which will be enough to get 6 flames on most classes. If you're in a group, drag him clockwise, which is the realm standard, and hope your group does the same, so you guys can all get solid damage. Foaming Pools is a bit tougher and has Genji going around the arena in a circle. He again doesn't shoot himself, so you can EP him, but it's tougher because he's moving, and you need to watch out for the secondary attack if there's shotguns coming from the walls, because they can instant kill you if you're standing in the middle of one of the walls and the shots fire. Follow him with EP and a short range weapon. He will eventually pass the stream, so you'll have to dip through the middle to keep up with him. The stars here silence. You really want to avoid getting hit by these if you still have your pet with you because you didn't take the challenge gate for the extra loot, so that you can keep spamming your ability. The next phase I'll talk about is Crashing Waves. Genji moves between the middle of the 4 walls. Again, he does not shoot here so you can EP him, but he's moving half the time, and the other half where he's standing still, you need to make sure the secondary attack of the ice shotgun doesn't obliterate you instantly, and you also need to watch out for the fog. You can stand like 0.5 tiles away from the boss to avoid getting hit by the fog, and avoid getting sickened. The secondary attack actually does not start until he moves off the first wall, and it actually happens before he gets to the second one, so you can quickly identify what the secondary attack is, and hit him when he gets to the second wall, as long as it's not the ice shotgun. Otherwise you're better off staying off the wall and using your close range weapon the whole time. Except when he's moving, you're free to EP him then, but when following, you want to go through the wall in an efficient manner. Do not go diagonally, you only want to take a row of bullets, so 2. Similarly to Foaming Pools, the Surging Rapids phase has the boss going around the room, but this time in a counterclockwise fashion, and he's shooting shots, making it too risky to try to EP, so use your best close range weapon, and swap with long range when you need to. He rotates against the tentacles, so you will have to go through the tentacle gaps fast enough, or if you're on full enough health you can go through a tentacle. I'll briefly go over how to do all the first boss lantern phases 0 flame for those trying to guarantee Umi in solo or coordinated small runs. If you want more detail on how to do the first bosses normally or even in the 0 flame, make sure to check out my Moonlight Village guide. Some lantern phases are super similar when doing them normally or 0 flame. I'll let you know when that's the case, and I won't say much on it. DPS phases are the same, you don't have to shoot the boss, and they're just easier because you don't have to worry about doing damage. First, Kaguya's phases. The yellow lightning themed dancer. You're always pet stasis during these lantern phases, even if you don't take the challenge gate. In chorus of the thundering drums, position yourself behind the lantern, prioritize dodging the jewel shots from the boss the most, as they deal the most, then try to avoid the lightning shots since they deal the second most and expose. Don't worry as much about the cone-ish looking shots from the sides. since they do the lowest damage and only silence. All shots move at a constant speed and angle in this phase, so it's up to you to micro-dodge them. Try to keep rotating, but if you fall behind the lantern and it's approaching, make sure to counter-rotate quickly over it to avoid generating any flames, and then continue following behind the lantern. I find mostly using camera rotation and pressing W to go forwards is the best way to dodge in this phase. As the Skyfall starts off really easy when zero flaming because the pinwheels at the bottom slowly creep up and reduce space to dodge. You start off with a lot of room, and eventually there's not much room between the bottom and the lantern. You should be able to get good healing at the beginning because it takes a while for things to start getting serious with the pinwheels coming up. Make sure to go around the horizontal lines obviously, and time the lightning as well, and also dodge the side pinwheels since they do a lot of damage each. But if you think it's too tough to go around a line, tactically tank one of the shots in the horizontal line to minimize damage, instead of having to tank like a few shots while trying to side strafe. Definitely worth using your reset to default camera angle key for this phase, and not camera rotating. Rhythm of an Empty Heart is actually easier when zero flaming in my opinion, even though the phase is longer. This is because when you don't have to sit on the lantern, there's a lot less awkward dodging situations and a lot more room to avoid the streams of boss shots and other shots. Now for the finale, Light Within the Storm, same shit as doing it normally basically. It just takes longer, but you don't have to worry about always being on the lantern the whole time, so similar situation as the previous phase we talked about. Just make sure you're avoiding the lines and being too close to the boss when they're banging their drums, and you should be good to go. Definitely the easiest zero flame finale by far. Now with Genji, the Blue Dancer. I actually find this one to have the hardest zero flame lantern phases. Remember your silence during these, so Paladin is not as good because it has low vitality to make up for its healing ability, which of course you can't use during these phases. Same situation as Priest and Necro. First, Downpour of the Barren Fields is a very important phase to do right, zero flame. It's completely different than standing in the middle, getting flames normally, but it actually is easier if you follow the steps. First, go to the bottom left of the map, and you need to stay here until you dodge 3 walls of shots. The first wall comes from the middle of the arena and has a gap in the middle you need to dodge through. The second wall comes from the middle of the bottom wall. This wall you need to dodge around by going closer to the middle of the arena and around the wall. And then the third wall again comes from the middle of the arena like the first, and has many gaps you can fit between. Then quickly you have to go to the bottom right of the arena. Just watch out for the white ball in between because it can show a caution sign, and follow up by shooting many shots that can easily insta-kill you if you're standing on it, and even walking past it. I've died way too many times to this. The projectiles do a lot of damage per shot. Just make sure to get the timing down, pass either quickly or hang back, and then pass later, but better if you pass it earlier than later. Sometimes the RNG on the ball timing can be cursed. Then when you're in the bottom right, you just have to dodge one more wall coming from the middle of the arena. You can go through the gap in the middle of the wall, and then you have to go back to the bottom left, just watch out for the silver ball again, and then you just have to repeat. So you have to exactly dodge 3 walls in the bottom left, then 1 in the bottom right, then another 3 in the bottom left, then 1 in the bottom right, and then another 3 in the bottom left, and you're done ski. I strongly recommend prioritizing dodging the red circles because they slow, so it will make it really hard to traverse around the walls and also move from map corner to corner. Also watch out if you need to tank the walls. You want to stand in a way that you only tank one shot from the wall rather than going like diagonally through it, tanking multiple. It does quite a bit of damage. Also use the toggle default camera rotation key for this phase, so you're looking forwards. Secondly, the unyielding water on stone phase is a toughie. Stay just behind the lantern. You really don't want to get further behind because the gaps between the shots from the boss become even tighter, and it becomes exponentially harder to catch up and dodge the shots. If you fall behind, you may need to hold W to catch up to just behind the lantern and spam HP pots, but hopefully you don't get to that situation. Especially avoid getting hit from the shots that travel in a line because they slow, making dodging more shots harder and staying just behind the lantern harder. While following behind the lantern, try to be closer to the edge of the arena because that's where the gaps expand the most, making them easier to dodge through. I like to toggle camera on mid and reset the default camera angle and try travel along the walls and along the lines so that the gaps are the biggest between these boss shots. The camera rotating and pressing W primarily strategy to move also works here. Then there's everyone's favorite, Torrents of Memories. This isn't really harder nor easier when doing it 0 flame, rather than trying to maximize the amount of flames in my opinion. Sure, you don't have to follow the lantern, which at times can be quite tough, but the phase is extended quite a substantial amount. Check out my first guide for tips on this phase since it plays the same. The only difference with 0 flame is you want to stand behind the lantern instead of on it, and you want to rotate as much as you can. If you do fall behind, of course, make sure when the lantern is coming back around that you quickly pass over it. Otherwise, make sure to check that first guide on more general ways to do this phase. Lastly, for Genji, the finale, called Tears in the Rain. Another tough phase. Start at the right side of the arena at the bottom of the corridor that's created from the boss shots. When the lantern comes close, make sure you're near the bottom to avoid lighting it. Make sure you don't touch the darkened part of the floor, because when you touch that you start to get dealt damage. When the lantern moves away, again, you have more room to dodge. The silver balls and the droplets do the least damage, so prioritize getting hit by these if you feel like you really need to get hit by a shot to avoid others. The ones you really want to avoid are the curved shots from the boss that travel in a cone, and the popcorn shots, as they expose and deal high damage relatively to the droplets and the little silver balls. But also you want to dodge the wavy shots because of their damage, and they're slow, which will make dodging even harder. Also, slow wearing off while doing a phase like this is really annoying, so if you're holding a key, you just go zoom when the slow wears off. Try to stay in the middle of the corridor, since the walls of the corridor can move and can lead you into a checkmate scenario, making you take damage from things you would rather not. Now for the last dancer, Miko, the pink dancer, where all her phases sicken, to make sure you're topped up on HP before the phase starts. If you're critically low near the end of any of these phases, you can spam your HP key so it goes through as soon as possible as the drought wears off. It can save your life, trust me. First, Vestiges of the Bygone Seasons is in my opinion the hardest 0 flame lantern phase, including Umi phases. This phase plays completely different when 0 flaming compared to when you're trying to get as many flames as possible, and there's 2 different strategies you can use. The one I use the most often is travelling around the side of the arena, almost touching the edge of the shots that are newly created. I slowly go around the arena until I approach the top, where I basically just try to skip it as soon as possible. I of course try to dodge as much as I can, but it is really tough. And then once I do pass, I slow down so that I can appreciate the easier parts to dodge, because all the shots come from the top basically. You just have to worry about Miko, who's shooting a triple volley of dual shots that do the highest damage in this phase, but they're easier to dodge because they move slowly, they have a consistent bullet pattern, and you're probably on the other side of the arena hopefully. But another strategy you can utilize is you can stay on the bottom side of the arena. You can watch for Miko coming close to you. Since she shoots 3 volleys of 2 shots, you can count the 3 shots, and then she has a bit of a gap before she starts shooting again. You can take advantage of this gap and pass her quickly, and then basically just chill at the bottom. It makes dodging the shots from the top easier, but it makes dealing with Miko's shots harder. If you do get the bleed debuff from one of the shots, you can get close to the middle 4 tiles away. It isn't enough to fully light the lantern, but it's enough to get the bleed cleanse that the lantern provides. Just make sure not to do it too much, because you might accidentally generate some spirits, ruining your 0 flame run. I especially do this when I'm trying to pass that dreaded top part where all the shots come out of, because not only is it less distance to travel, but I get the bleed cleanse on the way. I just make sure not to do it more than once or twice, a bit risky. Beauty is Solitary is basically the same as doing it normally, just that the petals are more damaging, since here you're not able to cleanse bleeding as much. But as usual, stand behind the lantern, then if you fall behind the lantern and it's coming up, counter rotate over it quickly. Same stuff here with Life's Everlasting Bloom. Basically the same phase again, just longer and without the bleed cleansing. So stand behind the lantern, you know the rest. And now for the finale, Petals Carried by the Wind. Find the lantern, then start behind it, and you have 2 different options. You can either chill on one side, or you can rotate with the lantern. I personally do a bit of both. I start off rotating with the lantern just behind it, and then when things get tough with dodging, I stay on the side where it gets hard. This usually happens because of bleed shotguns or shots from the boss. In this phase I really like to toggle camera on center, and reset my camera rotation to default, and travel along with the shots. But yeah, you still want to primarily dodge the shots from the boss. She basically shoots a constant stream of triple curse shots that deal the highest damage in the phase, that constantly go around her slowly. You either want to sit behind this, or even better, you kind of want to overtake it because it will slow you down and allow the lantern to catch up sooner. And then sometime through the phase, the bleed shotguns will start coming. They're basically undodgeable unless you're out of their range. Just know that they don't extend past more than half the arena, so what you can do is, if you see the bleed shotgun coming your way, you can stand just past half the arena. This is the point where I'd start chilling in one of the sides. And then when the shotgun passes you, you can then dodge back into where the shotgun expired. And then the shotgun starts coming counterclockwise, so you have to dodge it beneath you if you're on the right side, for example. And if you see the lantern coming, of course, as usual, try to pass over it as quickly as you can. Thanks so much for watching so far. Just like my guides help you, I can't hold myself any longer without thanking those who help me, the supporters on Twitch, YouTube, and especially Patreon. Consider supporting me financially if you want to help me make videos like this. Okay, now we're finally going to get into the Kitsune Umi boss fight itself. Let's first go over some things you need to know. Firstly, almost all shots armor pierce, so defense barely matters. Also, all shots pierce players. Just like the first bosses, Umi alternates between DPS and lantern phases, with the lantern phase being every second phase, and a finale following immediately after the third lantern phase, so 7 phases in total. Note that every lantern phase is a second phase, so as soon as it begins, you need to do your best with your current HP pool. It's best if you can heal up before these lantern phases, with your HP pots, with your regen, or with your pet, if it isn't disabled. Before we get into the DPS phases, let's talk about the 5 secondary attacks that can happen during the DPS phases, to give them more variety. The DPS phases are every second phase, starting with the first phase, with the 5th phase being the last. Each of these secondary DPS phases can only occur one time per fight, so you're guaranteed to face 3 of these following phases, for every Umi you do. Firstly, the bleed explosions. These first have warning symbols and then follow up with an explosion of bleeding shots that deal 80 damage each and inflict bleed for 3 seconds. Since it shoots 20 shots, it's best to not stand on the caution symbol, write that down. Remember that the 20 shots are equally spaced out and have a slight turn to them, so they can be hard to dodge until the gaps between the shots expand enough with more range. Also, you must remember that while you're bleeding, all healing from your vitality stat and the healing buff does not work, which is especially painful if you enable the challenge gate that makes you petless. Best thing to do in my opinion is walk away from the explosion until you're confident that you can dodge within the shots. Start walking away from the caution symbols when you see them, especially if you're close. Just make sure you're not delaying dodging into them for too long because there's going to be more bleed explosions which will make things more complicated. This is actually my most hated DPS secondary variation. Next up, I'll talk about the corner shots which are way easier. This also has warning indicators that after 2 seconds, follow up with 4 volleys of shots. First 4 shots, then 3 shots, then 2 shots, then 1 shot. And all these shots deal 100 damage each and curse for 3 seconds. One corner is fired from every 1 to 2 seconds. Because of the high damage and curse time per shot, these are a priority to dodge in almost every DPS phase. They're just easier to dodge than the previous shots we discussed because they travel at the expected trajectory and speed. Similarly, in the fireworks secondary phase, one of each of these fireworks stacks spawn in each corner. They shoot these popcorn looking shots dealing 80 damage each at a slow rate of fire, and they also move slow and expose for about 2 to 3 seconds. Just like the previous one I talked about, it's not too spooky or complicated, but if you do get exposed it can make you take way more damage from other shots in the phase. Similarly again, the rainbow shots is a secondary phase that has projectiles with a long tail coming in from the outside of the arena. This time not only the corners, but from any point of the outside. This is all a pretty easy one compared to the first phase we discussed, since these also have an expected trajectory. Okay, now for the secondary that gives most people the most issue when they do Umi, the spirit lines. This phase also used to be the most hellish for me, but with experience it actually became way easier than the bleed explosions in my opinion, because this again has a pretty expected trajectory. How it works is spirits move in a straight line up and down the arena. The flame itself has a small AoE of like 3x3 tiles that deals around 100-ish damage, and explodes explodes every 2 to 3 seconds. It also slows for about 3 seconds. On top of this, they also leave behind shots with no space to fit in between them, but they do expire after 1 or 2 seconds. These left behind shots deal around 80 damage and curse for about 3 seconds. One of the reasons why I feel like this phase is hell for most people is because of the fact that these spirit lines kind of alter how you can move in a phase. So they either excessively avoid these spirit lines, taking way too much damage from the other boss shots, or they walk through way too many of the lingering shots. The best way to deal with it is either go around or move perpendicular into the lines so that you only take 1 shots. So since the lines go from up and down to up, move left and right and left, right through them, while avoiding the flame explosion. But on top of all of these shots with the spirit lines, when these flames reach the top or bottom, they completely explode into many shots, similar to the bleed explosions where they have a slight turn to them, just without the bleed, and they deal 80 damage each. So in phases with the spirit lines, it's best to hang to the left and the right sides of the arena, away from where the lines will explode. If you are in a phase where you're forced to rotate or move a lot, try to overtake the lines if you see them coming before it's too late and they create way too much of an obstacle, or make sure to just take 1 shot while avoiding the Nova. This secondary attack can range from being the most hellish to the most easy, depending on the phase, so I'll make sure to discuss how to deal with this secondary attack depending on the phase as we're now going into the actual DPS phases. So for the DPS phases, remember they occur on the 1st, 3rd and 5th phase, and remember after these you're going to be sickened in the following Lantern phase right away, so try to regen in any way you can. You have like 3 seconds between the DPS phase ending and that bar disappearing and the Lantern phase. I'll let you know how to survive each phase, but also the strategies to max out your damage. Obviously if you're doing a zero flame, just don't shoot the boss, and you can follow the more safe and surviving strats that I give in the beginning. DPS phases are way easier to zero flame than the Lantern phases that I'll talk about afterwards. First, let's start with the Bright Flares phase. In this phase the arena is restricted into a smaller rectangle because of the shots going across the bottom and top of the room. Umi is also going crazy, absolutely psycho. She jumps around, alternating her target between the closest player and a random player every 3 seconds. Before she dashes, she displays caution signs all around her where she's gonna shoot a crapload of shots, and these shots will fire out when she starts dashing to the next target. These shots do 100 damage each and curse for 3 seconds, and she shoots many in total, 3 per line. There are also these small rainbow stars that slowly go across the arena that deal 60 damage each, but they also quiet the player for 3 seconds, meaning your whole mana bar gets wiped, which is especially painful if you're playing with the petless mode. Though the main priority for you, especially if you're learning, is to keep an eye on the boss, because she will have warning indicators of where she's going to shoot her shots, and one of these lines of shots can deal at least 300 damage to you. If you are avoiding all the boss shots but you're only getting hit by the quiet shots and the secondary alternate shots, it's pretty hard to die, so you definitely want to have dodging the main boss shots as a priority. And these shots do have a massive amount of telegraphing as long as you're keeping your eye on the boss. You have to know that there's these gaps between the boss where the shots will not shoot, so you can even be very close to the boss as long as you're at the right angle and you won't get hit by a shot. You can try stay on the other side of the arena from her if you're in a big group, since she likes to target closer players if you want to survive. But if you want to get the most damage on her that you can, you want to stay around the middle of the arena and follow her. This actually won't be as scary as it sounds if you are someone with more experience with the phase. The bigger issues for someone that is trying to max out their DPS on the boss is their shot accuracy, since she moves so much, and the quiet shot, since they wipe your entire mana bar, making you deal way less damage depending on the class. You want to be swapping between your close range weapon and a long range one, depending on what you can actually hit with. Bright Flares is actually the toughest Umi DPS phase to get damage on, but it can be easier for someone trying to get their first complete than other phases we'll talk about. The next phase, the Playful Chase. In this phase, Umi will chase players, which alternates between the nearest and the furthest. Because of this, it's actually best for players to stay near each other and close to her. People usually rotate clockwise in this game, so you want to just hope that everyone else does the same. If this is done, this makes the boss move slower, which makes all of the shots easier to dodge since you're walking past less, and it makes it easier to get damage on the boss. Umi shoots 3 equally spaced tight triple shotguns, dealing 120 damage per shot, and shooting every second-ish. This should be the highest priority to dodge. There's also rainbow shots that come across from the outside dealing 85 damage each, and expose and silence for 3 seconds. If it's not being dragged in a nice way, you're going to have to dodge wherever it's best. Just make sure you don't allow Umi to pin you to the wall. Stay away from the sides, especially the corners, so you have more dodging opportunities, because once you're hugging a wall, that's a direction of dodging you lose. Remember to overtake the spirit lines early if you get that as a secondary variation. If the boss is dragged well, you'll be able to stay close and use your close range weapon in order to maximize your damage and flames. Otherwise, swap to your longer range weapon when it's more optimal. Up next, we have a light show. Light show is personally the easiest phase in my opinion. Umi will rotate counterclockwise around the room, shooting rainbow shots towards the middle of the arena. There will be a stockpile there that will shoot 7 shots towards the outside, and the shots deal 60 damage each and silence for 4 seconds. In this phase you want to stay in front of her while you're both rotating. I find the biggest concern of this phase is usually the secondary attack. The line's secondary variation is probably the most painful here, because the lines can stop you in your tracks, so you want to overtake them early before they create too much of a complication, or tank a singular shot in the line without getting hit by the explosions. Personally, I like to not camera rotate here because it keeps things simpler. When I do rotate, I tend to screw up as it can mess with your subconscious judgment on the pathing of shots. Because of how easy this phase is in my opinion, it's usually the best to generate spirits in. Just follow the boss with a short range weapon. You can even EP it in the last quarter of the phase because the boss stops shooting. This phase is even easier to do no damage in. You can sit either on the left or right side of the arena. During the fireworks display phase, Umi will go to the bottom side of the room, where she stays still for the whole phase. The arena is made into a diamond shape because of the shots coming in from the top and the bottom of the map. Umi shoots out flames in straight lines that have caution signs as warnings. You need to avoid these because they deal insane damage. They shoot out 2 of their own shots to each side like a D-blade pattern every second, that also quiet and leave behind rainbow star shots that don't move, curse, and deal 60 damage. These flames explode when they travel far enough, similar to the line's secondary attack. It explodes into 12 equidistant shots, half being cone shots that deal 120 damage each, and the other half being popcorn shots that deal 100 damage each and curse for 4 seconds. The best way to get damage in during this phase is by staying around 4 to 5 tiles away from her. You can get away with being even more close and just strafing the flames when you see caution signs. As long as you strafe on time, it actually makes this phase really stress-free. Dodging backwards at all can just make things more complicated as you still need to dodge these shots. Another strategy that you can try if you're having trouble surviving this phase, or if you're just zero flaming, you can go to the top of the arena. There's this nice gap for you to just dodge in. You just need to watch out for the explosions from the expiring flames. But these flames move in a straight line, unlike the expiring lines secondaries and bleed shotguns, so they're much easier to dodge. This is exactly what the trajectory looks like. Lastly, in the Spirited Away phase, Umi will slowly rotate counterclockwise in the middle of the arena. She shoots many stars that move slowly, that you only need to worry about if you're doing the maximum DPS strats that I'll explain in a second. There's also 4 spirits that restrict the arena that you can move in, 2 of them making an inner circle, while 2 of them making an outer circle. These spirits also shoot out rainbow stars that deal 90 damage each and pet stasis for 3 seconds. When learning this phase or doing zero flame, you want to stay in between the 2 circles that are created, left or right side, if there is a line secondary variation. And from there, all you can do is do your best to micro dodge the shots. If you want to max out your damage, however, you're going to want to be in the middle circle with Umi, but it can be quite tough. You can always leave the arena if you're having trouble by optimally taking one of the shots from the inner circle that's created, at most. Unfortunately, if you're not in the middle, it does severely reduce your damage, especially if you're a melee character, since it's extremely hard to even get a single hit on. Now, I'll go over the Umi Lantern phases in detail for you guys. Of course, you're always sickened during these, so heal up before the Lantern phases begin, either by just locking in and regenning at the end of a DPS phase, or using HP pots or your ability if it heals. Also, don't forget that being on the lantern more makes you get more loot on average. Now, it's best to be within 2 tiles of the lantern, 4 tiles if you're struggling. If the lantern is moving, you always want to be at least slightly in front of it, especially if you're on a server that's far from your home because of ping. But of course, if it makes a difference between life and death, stay further away from the lantern. When you're more confident with the lantern phases, you can intentionally tank shots near the end of a phase if it means standing on the lantern more to get within that 2 tile range. If you're standing off the lantern too much, you're basically doing a challenge run, like the Zero Flame run, which is actually a respectable option against Umi if you're on a bad set, and you can't really get the spirits during the DPS phases, and you're solo. I'll go over how to maximize the flames on each phase, how to survive, and how to do each phase Zero Flame. First, we have the Rage Against the Dying Light phase. In this phase, the lantern spawns and stays in the middle of the arena. Umi rotates around the arena closer to the outside. She shoots many shots, including 4 streams of dual shots, of shots that deal 60 damage each. Every 3 seconds, she also shoots 15 cone shots equally spaced around her that deal 50 damage each and move at the same speed as the dual stream shots. Also, there's these unique slow moving shots that don't actually do any damage until they travel for a while, after which they land, and they still move slightly and litter the arena and deal 40 damage and expose for about 5 seconds. She relaunches these every 6 seconds or so. There's also explosions of 2 pairs of 5 rainbow comet shots that come inwards from the edge of the arena that's created. These deal 50 damage and curse for around 4 to 5 seconds. Okay, I know it's a lot, but don't worry, I'll make it easy for you. First of all, make sure you don't start the phase in the direct middle of the arena because she shoots many shots that will at least get close to insta-killing you. Let's talk about how to handle all the different shots Umi shoots in this phase. First, with the streams of dual shots. I find this to be the biggest challenge when going for maximum spirits and lantern time, on par with the RGB shots. To best avoid these shots, make sure Umi isn't getting too close to you by always standing on the other side of the lantern from Umi, still close enough within that 2 tile range to get the maximum flames. The closer you are to Umi, the more of an issue she will be. Sometimes the dual shots will go over the lantern and where you may be standing, in which case stay ahead of them and then quickly pass through the gaps that the stream has to make it an issue you don't have to worry about until the next line comes. The cone shots the boss shoots don't complicate things too much and they're slow and equidistant. What may spook you is the shots that linger on the floor. The best way to deal with these is, since you don't know when they're going to land, stay away from their path since they can land on you and deal damage instantly. And when they do land, realize they still move slowly. These shots should actually cause you the least stress because 1, they deal the least damage, and 2, if you do get hit by one of these, it cannot hit you again, meaning that you have much more room to dodge the other shots in now, until Umi reshoots the next volley of these. If you only get hit by these shots on the floor, it would be extremely hard to die. Also, be wary of the rainbow comment shots, since they deal 50 damage and apply a nasty curse for around 5 seconds. The curse will increase all other damage by 50%, making them super lethal. But if you are going for maximum flames, you're in the middle, so you're furthest away from where the rainbow shots spawn from, so you should be able to see them coming and slightly get out of their way. Keep in mind that all shots in this phase move in a straight trajectory. The rainbow shots can become much scarier when you're doing the zero flame strategy. The best way to zero flame this phase is start by being next to Umi where she's rotating from to delay her threat, because you need to move a lot in this phase to avoid her from catching up to you and giving you a smooch. Stay near the outside of the arena but not too close to the perimeter, because that's where rainbow comment shotguns spawn from, which can lead you to take a heap of damage really quickly. The sweet spot is 2 tiles away from the perimeter. That will give you enough space to dodge the rainbow comments, but it also keeps you far enough from the lantern. Also, keep in mind in regards to the RGB shots, they shoot in 2 volleys with alternating placements, kind of like melts from Oryx 3. So, stand in between the first shots and then move into the position where one of the shots in the first volley was shooting towards, to dodge the second volley. In the Festival of Remembrance phase, Umi stands in the middle of the room and the lantern rotates halfway between the middle of the room and the outside of the arena. And on the opposite side of the arena, where the lantern is, there's a killer flame trying to chase you down. Start the phase by standing near the middle and follow the lantern straight away. The phase starts off really easy, so there's a lot of free lantern time. In the beginning, there's just cone shots from the boss that deal 60 damage each and curse for about 3 seconds. These deal the most damage and should be your highest priority to dodge for the rest of the phase. Then, stars start coming out from the boss too, at a faster projectile speed, that deal 40 damage and expose for 4 seconds. These are the least damaging in my opinion, so if you have to make a choice of what to tank these. Lastly, droplet shots come out from the outside that deal just 60 damage, almost as bad as the cone shots from Umi. You want to always stay about 1 to 2 tiles ahead of the lantern so that you don't fall behind too much while you're trying to dodge. It also helps with ping. My preferred way to primarily dodge in this phase is to turn your camera and press W so the angle that you walk at between the shots is really precise. If you're looking to maximize maximize lantern time, and spirits, don't be afraid to get hit by the star shots. In this phase, if you only get hit by the star shots, it's basically impossible to die. If you're newer to the phase, feel free to fall behind and go forwards closer to the lantern when you're comfortable. This is also similar to what you should be doing when you're doing a zero flame. Always just stay behind the lantern until you need to fall back and then catch up again. So stay between the lantern and the red flame, just don't let the red flame catch up, because if it does, it will probably kill you. This should be the easiest Umi lantern phase for most, especially while doing zero flame, compared to the other phases. During the procession of lively spirits phase, there's only two kinds of shots. There's 7 columns of the droplet shots that come down at different speeds that deal 60 damage each and curse for about 3 seconds. You cannot survive on the left side or the right side of these 7 columns, there's too many shots. There's also Umi bouncing at 45-degree angles up and down the arena, except when she does reach the top or the bottom, where she just bounces to the opposite side. On each bounce, she shoots shotguns, containing shots dealing 60 damage each and exposing for 4 seconds. She shoots the shots at a consistent angle, with one volley coming out faster at 11.25-degree intervals. So there's one shot coming out to each side and 2 shots in between them. Then in the second slower volley, there's just 4 shots coming out diagonally. Remember this shotgun pattern. If she's beside you, make sure you're at least 3 tiles away and move slightly above or below where she shot the shotgun from to avoid the shots from the first volley. Start the phase by standing near the middle and take advantage of the initially empty arena by standing on the lantern as much as you can. I recommend using your reset to default camera rotation key so that your camera is pointed perfectly upwards, and toggle your camera on middle key so that you can see all around you. Follow the lantern as much as you possibly can while staying a tile in front of the lantern to allow for time to fall behind if you need to dodge, especially if you have higher ping. Staying in the middle 3 columns is nicer for beginners since you're closer to the lantern and further away from the Umi bouncers. Best way to think about this phase for dodging the rainbow droplets is there's basically 7 columns that you have to swap between. You do not want to be in the middle of 2 columns because you can take 2 shots that will deal a chunk of damage. Always choose the column where you can see a flame is the furthest away from hitting you, and catch up with the lantern when you can. Just remember that being on the lantern more makes the phase shorter and easier, and you'll get more loot. Avoid hanging out at the bottom, which is a bit of a trap new players fall into, because you can't go down anymore, removing one whole direction of dodging, and setting up yourself for potential checkmates where no player could dodge. With the Umi bouncers, remember she moves at 45-degree angles when going up and down the arena. Stay away of her position, because it can help you prevent getting caught being too close to her when she does do one of these shotguns. You can also pay attention to the minimap by zooming in, and her location will be the red dot. Most important thing is to stay cool during this phase. Don't overly try to dodge shots, sometimes standing still is the best strategy, because the shots are so compact that if you do move in unfavourable ways just because you feel like you need to, you might take way too much damage, versus standing still. For Zero Flame, it's actually quite a different game. When the lantern is moving in the opposite direction, take the earliest opportunity to cross over. As long as you cross decently fast, you don't have to worry about lighting the lantern enough to generate flames. Biggest issue you'll have with Zero Flame in this phase is getting decision fatigue with the lantern crosses, and getting pinched by the lantern on the bottom where you will have to dodge in unfavourable ways or you'll accidentally light the lantern too much. So you want to avoid getting stuck at the bottom even more so during Zero Flame. Now for the finale called the Fireworks on a Starless Night. You are actually stunned during this phase, so you can't shoot. So you want to unequip items like Ethereal Happy, which usually slow you on shooting but instead will give you 15 speed here, which is really bad. And you won't be able to abuse some other on-shooting items like Curious or the self-slowing rings. The lantern spawns in the middle of Umi and rotates around the arena counterclockwise. After a few seconds, Umi starts shooting the first shots of 5 curved streams of these 50 damage cone shots that curse for 3 seconds. These are the shots you want to avoid the most for the duration of the fight. The cone shots have a slight curve to them that you need to watch out for. Because of these curves, they make these 5 gaps between the shots that you can ride. Then stars spawn from outside of the arena and travel through the battlefield. These deal 30 damage and expose for around 3 seconds. Then a square arena gets made, trapping you closer to the boss. These outside projectiles do as much damage as the Umi shots, and should be your highest priority to dodge. Then after like 5 seconds, every 5 seconds, a caution sign appears from opposite corners, and then shoot a cone of 5 shots dealing 50 damage each. These come out fast and then slow down and stay still for about a second before despawning. These shots also have a consistent shotgun, so they have consistent gaps that you can learn. This is what it looks like. About halfway into the phase, the explosion also gets rainbow comets added to them. There will be about 2 to 3 per explosion that you have to worry about. These deal 30 damage and travel at a random angle, but are spaced evenly. First biggest tip of this phase is learn to hug the sides as close as you can. If you learn this, you'll find the biggest gaps in between the shots from Umi, which are the ones that you need to be dodging the most. Since the Umi shots do have a slight bend to them, dodging between them can be really tough, so be careful. But because of these bends in the shots, they create these gaps that I mentioned before that you can stay in. Though if you do want to keep up with the lantern, which I do recommend doing, you need to fit between the shots sometimes. But if you're having trouble, like if you become low on HP, you can ride this gap until the end of the phase. Initially though, you want to stay on the lantern for as long as you feel comfortable. You should be 1 to 2 tiles ahead in case you need to fall behind to dodge, and because of ping. While following the lantern, the explosions from the corner can be daunting, but you can learn the timings and the pattern of the shotguns in order to learn how to squeeze through them. You must master this if you want to get maximum flames on the lantern phase consistently. When you see that you might have an unlucky rotation and the lantern is passing over one of these caution signs, you can either hang back until the explosion happens, or better yet, pass ahead fast, a few tiles ahead of the lantern. But my biggest phase for dealing with these explosions is by learning the pattern. One of the most important things to keep in mind about this phase is if you have to get hit by a shot, make it the stars. Not only do these do the least damage, but their random directions can make it a bit stressful to dodge, leading you to tank even higher damage shots. They're also quite unavoidable at times if you have bad luck. RNG can never be an excuse on not completing this phase, but it definitely is an excuse when it comes to doing this phase hitless. If you only get hit by the star shots during this phase, it's basically impossible to die. So you can either keep up with the lantern in order to get the most flames and keep up with the boss, or you can counter rotate, which is what you have to do during the zero flame, and you want to move a bit faster when the lantern does come by. But a third strategy that you can use is you can stand between the 2 corners on the wall. It's a nice place to be because here you completely avoid the explosions from the corners. You also get the biggest gaps between the Umi shots. The only threats here are the RGB stars and comets, but the comets only start spawning later in the phase anyway. To be the most successful at doing the zero flame version of this phase, you want to stay behind the lantern at least 4 tiles away so you don't light it. You may have trouble keeping up with this gap behind the lantern because this is a harder version of the phase. It's going to last at least 50% longer. If you're struggling to follow, hang out on one of the sides, or if that feels uncomfortable, ride the gaps in between the Umi shots. And then when you see the lantern coming, you need to cross quickly. You can do this by taking advantage of the gap in the Umi shots. And then you can start following more than 4 tiles behind the lantern again, otherwise you're going to have to cross it multiple times, which can be a risk for generating flames. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe so you get notified when I post more guides and videos. Click the video on screen now if you want help in creating the perfect pet for free. Catch you next time. Peace.